I never thought a paper plate and a folding chair could feel like betrayal. But they did. That night, they felt heavier than all the years I'd spent giving up pieces of myself for someone I loved more than life itself. My name is Janice Rowell, and I've always believed that motherhood was less about grand gestures and more about the quiet things, the tiny, thankless acts done when no one is looking. Packing lunches before sunrise. Stitching up worn-out jeans with tired fingers. Telling bedtime stories with a smile, even when you haven't slept more than 4 hours in weeks. That's the kind of mother I was. I was 31 when my husband Kyle died in a roofing accident. I remember the phone call. I was folding laundry, Terrence's little Spider-Man pajamas, when the phone rang. It was raining that day. Funny how you remember those small things when your life changes in an instant. Terrence was only 6. He didn't really understand what death meant then. All he knew was Daddy wasn't coming home. I held him that night while he cried himself to sleep, and I made him a promise I never said out loud. You won't go without. I'll make sure of it. That was the beginning. I got a job at the front desk of the Asheville Motel off Highway 25. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. After that shift, I worked evenings at a diner just outside of downtown. Some nights, I didn't get home until nearly midnight. Still, I made sure Terrence had a hot breakfast the next morning. I never let him feel the weight I was carrying. I remember making his Halloween costumes from scratch every year. The T-Rex one was my favorite. I stayed up 2 nights sewing scales onto green felt, so it looked just right. He didn't know that I went to work the next day on 2 hours of sleep. He just smiled when he saw himself in the mirror. That smile was worth it. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment for most of his childhood. I gave him the bedroom and made a little nest for myself on the couch. I like the couch, I used to say. It's close to the TV. But truthfully, it was so he'd feel like he had his own space. I skipped out on new shoes and wore the same winter coat for 5 years so he could go on school trips and wear name-brand sneakers like the other boys. I didn't mind. That's what moms do. By the time Terrence got into college, I'd saved up just enough to cover his tuition without taking loans. I cashed out the tiny life insurance policy Kyle had left behind and added my own savings. Watching him walk across that graduation stage was one of the proudest moments of my life, even though he never mentioned me in his speech. I told myself he was nervous, that he forgot, that it didn't mean anything. I clapped and cried with everyone else. When he landed a good job in real estate, I was thrilled. And when he wanted to buy his first home, I emptied what little I had left to help him with the down payment. I thought, this is it. He's made it. We made it. So when Terrence called me last spring, saying he wanted to throw me a real celebration for my 65th birthday, I felt something light up inside me. I hadn't felt special in a long time. It'll be big, Ma, he said. Elegant. I want everyone to know what you mean to me. He said he'd take care of everything. The guest list, the venue, the food. You just show up looking gorgeous, he joked. Like you always do. I spent weeks thinking about what to wear. I chose a soft peach wrap dress I'd only worn once to a wedding. I even got my nails done first time in years. And, of course, I baked my pecan pound cake. Terrence's favorite since he was little. I thought it'd be a sweet little surprise. The party was at Sycamore Springs, a swanky retirement community on the west side of town. The kind of place with champagne fountains and valet parking. I was almost overwhelmed when I walked in. The ballroom was packed, maybe 100 people, all dressed like it was a gala. I saw Terrence laughing near the bar, surrounded by men in suits and women with glossy hair. But something didn't feel right. My name wasn't on the welcome board. The photo slideshow playing in the corner had exactly 1 picture of me. And when I asked where I was supposed to sit, Terrence didn't even look up from his drink. Just over there, Ma, he said casually, pointing to a folding chair near the catering station. Closer to the kitchen. More your vibe. I thought he was joking. But he wasn't. There were gold Chiavari chairs at the main tables. The kind that look like they belong at a celebrity wedding. I sat on a cold folding chair with a paper napkin and no place card. No one even offered me a slice of the 3-tier cake in the center of the room. So I opened the Tupperware from my bag and ate my own damn cake. Alone. That's when it hit me. This party wasn't for me. It was for him. To show off. To look like a good son. I wasn't the guest of honor. I was background. And suddenly, that chair felt like a spotlight on everything I had ignored for years. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being erased. I stayed seated longer than I should have, holding a tiny plastic fork and chewing slowly, even though I couldn't really taste the cake anymore. The folding chair dug into my back, and the hem of my dress kept catching on its jagged metal edge. People passed me like I wasn't even there. A few of the catering staff gave me sympathetic glances, but no one said anything. Why would they? I looked like one of them. Old lady, paper plate, back by the kitchen. I could have been a volunteer, or someone's forgotten aunt. But I wasn't a stranger here. I was the reason this entire event existed. Terrence never told me that the celebration was costing my money. I found out days later that he'd used $180,000 from my retirement account, the one I'd been saving for nearly 3 decades, to pay for this elaborate show. Sycamore Springs wasn't just any venue. It was where Terrence had plans to get new clients. That's why the developers were there. The caterers were from the company he used to impress investors. The decorations? The string quartet? The wine from Napa Valley? All part of his image. And me? I was just the excuse. The cardboard cutout of the loving mother he could trot out in conversation. Raised me on her own, he probably said that night. Taught me everything I know about hard work. Except he said that to everyone but me. I sat and watched him deliver a long toast about resilience and grit. He raised his glass to those who made us who we are, but never once said the word mom. People clapped. Someone patted him on the back. A woman dabbed her eyes. And me? I sat by the kitchen door, blinking into the overhead lights, trying to swallow down the burn in my throat. I had told myself for years that his small oversights were just that, small. That he loved me in his own way. That he was just busy, distracted, trying to make something of himself. But this wasn't a missed birthday card or a rushed phone call. This was public. This was cold. I excused myself halfway through the speech and walked to the restroom. There, under the too bright light and the lavender-scented hand soap, I stared at myself in the mirror. Who was this woman? Hair curled, nails freshly done, dress still hanging just right despite the crumpled seat. I looked like someone who had been honored, celebrated. But inside, I felt gutted. When I stepped back into the hall, I didn't return to the folding chair. I stood near the exit instead, watching from the shadows. Terrence never noticed. Not even once. That night, I went home to my small, neatly kept house. The porch light buzzed faintly, and the cat from next door brushed against my ankles, meowing for food. I gave him some tuna and sat at the kitchen table with the lights off. That was when I saw it. A yellow manila envelope tucked beneath the stack of mail I hadn't bothered to check before the party. Inside was a document titled, Transfer of Ownership, Residential Property. The house. My house. He wanted me to sign it over to him. There was a note, printed in the corner in his assistant's handwriting. For estate simplification. Let me know once signed, T. I sat there staring at the paper for nearly an hour. I read it once. Then again. And then again. It wasn't just a request. It was an assumption. Terrence assumed I would hand over the last thing that belonged solely to me. The house where I'd poured love into every room. The kitchen where I'd taught him to whisk pancake batter. The porch where I'd sat every Sunday morning with coffee, praying he'd call. It wasn't the request that hurt the most. It was the ease with which he made it. He hadn't asked me if I was okay living alone. He hadn't asked if I needed anything. He hadn't even bothered to hide what this was really about. To him, I was now a spreadsheet to be managed. A logistical concern. Something to be transferred and signed off. I didn't cry that night. I thought I might. But something else came instead, clarity. I saw everything I hadn't wanted to see before. The way he interrupted me on calls. The way he always changed the subject when I mentioned needing help with yard work. The way he never asked me to babysit or be part of his life in any real way. I had been useful. I had been generous. I had been available. But I had never been seen. That night, Something shifted inside me. I walked through the house room by room, placing my hand on each wall. I opened the drawers I never bothered with. Old recipe cards, Terrence's baby shoes, Kyle's high school baseball glove. I sat on the floor of the hallway and let myself feel everything. This was my home, my life, my history, and I wasn't about to give it away to someone who couldn't even give me a chair. I knew then that I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Something had to change. Not out of revenge, but to finally take care of myself. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think I even blinked. Morning came like an afterthought, slipping quietly through the blinds, casting long pale stripes across the kitchen floor where I still sat, the unsigned property transfer folded neatly beside a cold cup of tea. I didn't throw the document away. I didn't even tear it up. I left it there on the table, as a reminder, a marker of the line that had been crossed. People think betrayal comes like a slap, loud, sharp, sudden. But sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, through years of being talked over, forgotten, or gently dismissed. Sometimes, betrayal feels like being thanked with a smile while being asked to disappear. That morning, I called a lawyer. Not the family lawyer Terrence had referred me to years ago. No, I wanted someone independent. I found a woman named Delia Groves, a retired probate attorney who now only handled cases for older women. When I told her what had happened, she didn't flinch. "Seen it more times than I care to admit," she said. "You're not alone. That's the good news. The bad news is you've got some cleaning up to do." Over the next few weeks, I did just that. I closed the joint account Terrence had access to, the one I'd set up years ago, just in case he needed help paying his mortgage. I transferred the house into a living trust with very specific instructions. And I rewrote my will. It took me 2 whole afternoons and 3 full pots of coffee, but I got through it. I removed Terrence's name entirely. Not to punish him, but because he no longer felt like family. Instead, I started something new. I called it the Quiet Chair Fund, named after the lonely metal seat I had occupied at my own party. A scholarship and housing grant program for women over 60 who had been sidelined or neglected by their own children. Delia helped me set it up. "You'd be surprised how many women like you there are," she said, handing me the official documents. "We've all been folding chairs at someone else's table." I didn't cry when I signed the paperwork. I smiled. Then I went a step further. I had a fake set of documents drawn up, ones that looked like the originals Terrence had sent me. They were clean, legal-looking, and completely empty of consequence. I left them in the same yellow envelope on my kitchen table, right on top of the pile of mail he always glanced through when he visited. I didn't hear from him for 2 months, and in that silence, I started to live again. I went back to the local community center, one I'd volunteered at before my shifts had gotten too long and my energy too short. That's where I met Eileen. Eileen had soft gray curls and the kind of face that had known both joy and sorrow. She was painting small ceramic birds when I first saw her. We started talking during a bingo game, and the next thing I knew, we were having coffee at her place every Wednesday. Her story mirrored mine in too many ways. Her son had married into a wealthy family and slowly began acting like she was some relic from the past, polite on the phone, absent in person. She had grown used to silence. With Eileen, I didn't feel invisible. We laughed. We cried. We swapped recipes and watched bad TV and helped each other carry groceries. One afternoon, as we sat on her porch drinking peach tea, she reached over, touched my hand, and said, "You know what, Janice? You still have so much love in you. You just need to stop giving it to the people who leave you empty." That stuck with me. By the time Terrence showed up again, unannounced and tight-lipped, I was ready. He knocked on the door like it belonged to him. "Ma," he said, stepping in without waiting for me to invite him. "We need to talk." I gestured to the couch. "Have a seat." He held up the document from the envelope. "So, you signed it?" "I did." He exhaled, clearly relieved. "Good. I just want to make things easier, you know? Keep it all streamlined." I looked him in the eye. I hadn't done that in a long time. "No, Terrence," I said gently. "You wanted to make things easier for you." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood and handed him a photo album I'd pulled from the shelf earlier. "This is what you're walking away from." He opened it. The first photo was of him in the dinosaur costume I had stayed up 2 nights sewing. Next page, pancakes in the kitchen. Next, the two of us sitting on the porch, my arms wrapped around him. "I kept thinking," I said quietly, "that maybe you'd look at me one day and see all of this. But I've realized something." He looked up. "I was never your priority. I was your foundation. Something to build on, and then forget once you reach the top." He shifted uncomfortably. "That's not true." "It doesn't need to be," I said, soft but certain. "I'm not waiting for your apology. Or your permission." He stared at the album as if it might change, as if the memories might speak for him. But they didn't. He left without another word. And this time, I didn't follow him to the door. The house was quieter after Terrence left. Not just the stillness of silence, but something deeper, like a room had finally been cleared of a weight it had been holding too long. I didn't cry. I didn't replay the conversation 100 times in my head like I used to when he said something that stung. This time, I didn't second-guess myself. Instead, I turned off the porch light, locked the door, and brewed myself a cup of mint tea. Then I sat down in my chair. It's an old wingback I bought at a yard sale 10 years ago. Worn cream fabric with little blue flowers stitched into the arms. I'd always loved that chair, but I'd never thought of it as symbolic until now. Now, it meant something more. I sat in that chair every morning after that, with the sun coming through the window and the radio humming in the background. No more waiting for his calls. No more chasing his affection like it was something to be earned. For the first time in years, I felt like my life belonged to me. Eileen and I started hosting Sunday brunches for other women at the community center. Most of them were like us, mothers, grandmothers, caretakers, and widows. Women who had spent years giving and giving until there was barely anything left for themselves. We started calling ourselves the Second Bloom Society, a little dramatic, sure, but it felt right. Every week, we shared stories, swapped advice, and laughed in ways that felt like medicine. And the Quiet Chair Fund began to take shape in real ways. Delia helped me file the paperwork to make it official, a small nonprofit dedicated to funding housing, groceries, and support services for women over 60 who had been emotionally abandoned by their families. The first recipient was a woman named Maribel, whose daughter had moved across the country and cut contact after marrying into money. She'd been living in a rundown motel for 2 years after her lease ended and her pension dried up. We got her into an apartment, paid her rent for a year, and connected her with a therapist and support group. She called me crying the day she moved in. "I thought no one saw me anymore," she whispered. "I see you," I said. "We all do." One afternoon in spring, I was pruning the lavender by my porch when the mail arrived. A thick envelope. Legal stationery. My hands went cold for a second, reflex. But it wasn't from Terrence. It was from the university, where he worked. Inside was a letter. They were closing the business incubator he'd helped found, due to ethics concerns and mismanagement of donor funds. My stomach sank. I hadn't wished this on him. I never wanted to see him fall, only to see me clearly. The next week, I got a voicemail from him. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I messed up. I thought I was doing the right thing. I guess I always figured you'd be there no matter what. I didn't realize how far I'd gone. I'm sorry." He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for the house. He just apologized. I didn't call back right away. I sat with that message for a few days. I played it again when I didn't know how I felt. And then, finally, I deleted it. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need it anymore. Some people might call what I did revenge. Cutting him out of the will. Building something without him. Walking away. But that's not what it was. This was reclamation. This was finally choosing myself after decades of waiting to be chosen. Now, every Thursday, I teach a small class on container gardening at the center. I sip sweet tea on my porch with Eileen. I paint, terribly, but joyfully. I write letters to women across the country who write to the Quiet Chair Fund, telling them they are not invisible. I still keep the photo album on my shelf. Not as a wound, but as a record. Of what I gave. Of what I survived. And when people come over, they don't sit me in the corner anymore. They ask me to take my place at the head of the table, because that's where I've always belonged. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Your support means everything. If this story touched you or made you think, please subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful stories.